Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's session on driving entrepreneurship in the social sciences. I'm Tony Walker, Deputy Director of the Masood Enterprise Centre here at Lions Manchester Business School. Today's session forms part of the Aspects annual event series, which is running across September and October. I'd like to start briefly by introducing our fantastic panel today. Firstly, we have Dr. Laura Etchells, Enterprise and Business Development Manager from the Masood Enterprise Centre. We then have Dr. Alison Edmonds, Director of Epic Steps Careers, a social entrepreneur and executive careers coach. We then have Ricardo Clement, Professor of Interactive Music and a practitioner at the cutting edge of music, gaming and digital arts. Just to give you an overview of the agenda and running order, today's webinar will showcase the work we do at the Masood Enterprise Centre, i.e. MEC, in developing entrepreneurial skills among social scientists and discuss best practice in driving entrepreneurship in this area. Firstly, Laura will showcase our early highlights of how we actually started to drive activity in the area and engage with social sciences staff, students and graduates, taking their ideas forward and helping them towards start-up and spin-out. Alison will then showcase herself as one of the social entrepreneurs that came out of our programme and will discuss her personal journey and experiences when going through the programme and beyond, and give you some insights and tips on what the journey is to becoming a social sciences entrepreneur. I will then describe how we've benefited from working with the Aspect programme since joining, and particularly how this has benefited MEC and its activities with other universities. And finally, Ricardo will showcase his own journey joining the recent Success programme and what motivated him to develop his own ideas from leading a busy academic career to wanting to become an active academic entrepreneur. So I'll now hand you over to Laura for the first part of the session.
Thanks, Tony, for the introduction. I'll begin with a brief introduction about the Masood Entrepreneurship Centre and then move on to some of our key learnings and best practice from our early work, as Tony mentioned, and then cover off some of our achievements and then give a brief summary at the end. So the Masood Entrepreneurship Centre really is the focal point for enterprise and entrepreneurship at the University of Manchester for students, staff and graduates. It really is entrepreneurship for all, encouraging and supporting startup businesses. Now this is achieved through increasingly agile blended on and co-curricular activities. Specifically in the context of social entrepreneurship, we support students and recent graduates through taught undergraduate and postgraduate enterprise modules to stimulate interest in social enterprise. We have enterprise schools and research programs themed on social innovation. The incorporation of a social category in our annual flagship business plan competition, Venture Further, attracts a really high number of entries. Here at Manchester, social responsibility is one of the university's 3 core strategic goals, sitting equally alongside its commitment to world-class research and outstanding learning and student experience. Now, if we go back a few years, our activity really began in 2012 with a pioneering programme to place social entrepreneurship at the heart of university culture and infrastructure. At that stage, the university became one of 58 other HEIs across the UK to partner with Unlimited, the social enterprise charity, and HEFCI, the Higher Education Funding Council. Building on a successful pilot scheme within the Faculty of Humanities, we looked to expand social enterprise initiatives across all the faculties. We adopted a 3-stage model of find, fund and support. So how did we find social entrepreneurs on campus? Well, we already had existing entrepreneurial support mechanisms, and so we launched an awards programme, essentially a competition model, and publicised through the usual channels, e-bulletins, direct mail outs, social media, etc. But in addition to this, we combined a mechanism of encouraging individuals to come forward with ideas through drop-in sessions and workshops. We also used our existing working relationships with university partners, such as the business engagement team and the social responsibility team, to enable a real coordinated approach to stimulate individuals to engage with us. We raised the profile of social enterprise on campus through workshops and events to increase the understanding of social enterprise, what it really means, and the language around it. And quite often we found that individuals didn't identify themselves as social entrepreneurs, even though they were already making a difference. Giving individuals the opportunity to consider their own capacity for social entrepreneurship and the scope to discuss their ideas, as well as guidance and tools to enhance the quality of their applications, really was very valuable. And then funding, part of that second tier. What sort of funding did we have available for individuals? Well, we had awards of up to £5,000, with smaller awards to try out and test the ideas to see if it was viable and to understand what was needed, through to larger awards, essentially used for robust market research and to grow your idea. For even more advanced ideas, we had larger awards of up to £15,000, which are available to enable individuals to step into their enterprise. How did we support the ideas that secured funding? Well, we created more bespoke workshops, focusing on building confidence, resilience, capacity building, and created a social enterprise ambassador role to provide fledgling entrepreneurs with knowledgeable insights, focus, and direction, specifically through our Just Social series of roundtable discussions and through action learning sets. Over the time frame, we further enhanced activities addressing awareness raising, idea creation, piloting and testing initiatives, through to more strategic support for business modelling and capacity building. Now for some figures. What were our achievements in that 4-year time frame of the programme? Well, we engaged with over 750 students, staff and recent graduates. We received in excess of 150 entries to the dedicated social enterprise competitions and awarded over 55 awards to the value of £170,000. In addition to this, as a team, we were recognised by Unlimited, winning the prestigious HAI of the Year award for supporting social entrepreneurship 2 years running. But more importantly, many of our social enterprises and key projects also won awards for outstanding innovation, outstanding achievement, and social enterprise of the year. Our activities also recognised in the university's annual Making a Difference Awards for a dedicated social innovation category. So we found working with Unlimited enabled us to really develop an extensive ecosystem of support for social entrepreneurs, which from 2016 we consolidated to replicate across all disciplines through our Innovation Optimizer, empowering innovators to turn their ideas into reality. This encompassed activities such as Ignition, a dedicated speaker series to raise awareness of the process of becoming an entrepreneur and the support available, Roadmap, a lean startup programme over a 5-month intensive period, and Momentum, giving access to funding, expertise, business planning, and further support to develop the business. So for us, the key highlights really, in summary, are awareness raising. That truly is key, enthusing and inspiring budding entrepreneurs to come forward and creating a learning environment to help develop not only the ideas, but the entrepreneurs themselves. Focused skills development sessions, particularly covering the entrepreneurial mindset, capacity building, time management, confidence and resilience go hand in hand with market testing and business modelling. Measuring social impact, being able to demonstrate the value, impact and change the product, service, innovation can make in the market really is key. And interestingly, we were chosen as a case study with Social Investment Business Group and Unlimited. And during that time, we coined the phrase social IP. And we all know intellectual property in other disciplines is easier to identify and protect. So how can we identify and capture the tangible assets in a social setting as an attractive proposition recognised by potential investors? And that's something that we're still working a lot around in this area. So we can obviously do more of what we've been doing over these numbers of years, but actually the key element for us is scaling these enterprises and making them investable. So I'll leave that there and I'll hand back over to Tony. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Laura. That's a really good story to lead into our next session, which is with Alison Edmonds of Epic Steps. Alison was one of our pioneers through the programs Laura's described and is now spearheading some great developments in her own area. And Alison will now describe her journey and hopefully that will inspire you all. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I'm Alison. I had always known that I was a really creative type. I loved doing and still love doing things that involve creation of newness, taking things to the next level. And despite my dad and my grandmother running their own businesses, I never thought of myself as an entrepreneur. You know, I liked my career and I liked being paid every month. Now, my background is with Alliance Manchester Business School, and I led the MBA careers provision for full-time and more latterly the executive part-time MBAs from all over the country. And it was absolutely fantastic. I loved that ability to influence their career transition. I soaked up everything to do with careers, recruitment, employers, but also leadership and sustainability. And what I noticed that resonated with me more and more was these three areas. One, of course, was careers, one was leadership, and one was sustainability. And I started to think, wonder what I can do to make those three pillars come together. Now, I already was working with these fantastic MBAs, and I used to think, well, you know, are they going to do well without me? Probably. And I started to think, how can I bring that value back to young people? You know, what about children? Do they know what these opportunities are? And the first musings and wanderings began to appear in my mind about what I might do to bring about some kind of social impact. But I had no idea what that was, and it was really a very vague idea. And I remember distinctly sitting in an IOD conference in Manchester some years ago and looking around the room at the speakers and the people around the tables and how incredible they were. And I thought, I wonder how we could bring this kind of inspiration back to young people. And I thought, actually, I can run conferences for children. And that's how Epic Steps became its first idea, bringing leadership, sustainability and careers back to young people in the form of conferences for children. Now, of course, I had no concept of doing this anything other than as a sideline. I thought I would continue in my job. I spoke to everybody I trusted. I asked them to critically assess my ideas. I connected to more people, and I really learnt about schools, education and corporates. But again, it was still an idea. I hadn't committed to being an entrepreneur at all. I was miles away from leaving MBS. And of course, what did I know about running a business? You know, I was running a careers team. Then unexpectedly, all my ducks fell into a row without any planning at all. And the first thing that happened was that my job was deleted overnight. And it was gone. And there were no other really senior jobs for me to go for. Now that led me to think, okay, I need to think about what I'm doing next. So I connected myself to the Enterprise Centre, the Masood Enterprise Centre. And I was going there because I loved entrepreneurship anyway. Still, it didn't seem to be something I would do. But because of my connection with them, I realised that they did training for entrepreneurs, for social entrepreneurs. I thought, oh, well, I'll go along. I'll see what it's like. I've got an idea and let's see if there's anything in it. And that eventually led to me getting a grant to actually try out my idea. And that was, those were key milestones in my journey towards being a social entrepreneur. Now, it's very tough losing your job. You know, that wasn't comfortable at all. Now, when I look back, I realise it was the great thing. But I knew it was now or never. So joining that programme with the Masood Enterprise Centre was a game changer. I was going through and learning all the skills that I needed to run my own business, the knowledge I needed to be able to drive every part of a business. And, you know, I started to define what that concept was. You know, what was my vision and mission? What was the business canvas going to look like? And there was so much training and support to be clear on that. What would the business plan be? How could I create a sustainable revenue stream? And it started to feel like it could actually be something I could begin. But I still didn't really believe that I was going to be an entrepreneur, because that always seemed to be for other people. However, I was leaving the University of Manchester, you know, I was leaving the business school. So I made a commitment to set up the board. And the first one was, what legal structure am I going to adopt? And again, the Enterprise Centre were there to say, well, these are the pros and cons of all your choices. And I knew for me, I wanted to be entrepreneurial. So it was easy for me to choose a social enterprise structure. And I wanted people to do it with. You know, my barrier in a lot of ways to starting a new business was, I don't want to do it on my own. So I thought carefully about, who did I want on my bus with me? And it came down to, who do I rate, like, and trust? And lots of conversations during the training enabled me to identify the qualities of the person that I wanted to share this experience with. And it's not just about what they bring to the table, it's how much you trust them and you want to work with them. Now, it just so happened that when I left the business school, the personal circumstances of my two other board directors changed suddenly, and they couldn't contribute. They couldn't give the time to the business that they thought they could. So I thought, right, I need to be able to work some way to make this forward. So I created a board of trusted advisors. And I drew on the knowledge and expertise of people who weren't on my board, but they were able to help me. And that was key. And the Enterprise Centre continued to play that role, so that whenever I had a question about how do I do this, or what's going wrong with this, or how do I organise IP in my business, all sorts of questions, they were there to actually support me through that. And then, of course, we're piloting. We've got the grant award to pilot our first Epic Steps conference for children. And we're all in creator warrior mode. You know, we're going to solve the world's issues. We're going to end the climate crisis. We're going to create wonderful human beings. And very quickly, you find yourself wanting to solve everything. And we knew that we had to define the problem really clearly, and that had been really drilled down to us in the training. You know, focus on the problem. What is it you're trying to solve? And be really specific. Steve Jobs, for example, you know, he wasn't successful because of the things he did do. He was successful because of the things he didn't do. So we thought about the problem, and the problem we knew we wanted to solve was too many young people aren't making good choices about their future. And so our mission was, we want to help people make responsible decisions, meaning great for themselves, great for their employers, great for society, and great for the planet. Now, after the pilot, we then managed to get the next grant, and Laura talked about this. This was the actual launch grants. So we were able to work with several schools, corporate partners, and do some proper full delivery. And this was excellent. You know, we started to feel that we had a future. We were creating the relationships. And I quickly realized that social entrepreneurship is absolutely about reputation, and that reputation is driven by the impact that you make, and it's got to be good, and you've got to measure it. And the values that you are driven by, you know, is the language you use, the business model, the behavior, the mission that you're on, is it values led? And that was really core to us. Now, right at the beginning of that startup mode, you have so many questions. You need so much support during that startup phase because everything is being learned. And the Enterprise Centre were fantastic for this. They were on support, but I also met colleagues in the training program who were also becoming social entrepreneurs, and we created a peer support group. And every month we would Zoom call each other and ask crazy questions and vent about how hard or great things were, and generally help each other and discuss strategy and make connections. It's a bit like being a zoo. Imagine being a lion in a zoo and you're in captivity and then you're released out into the savannah. You know, people are not going to bring you an antelope at the end of the day to eat. You've got to find it. But it's so much fun because you can do exactly what you want whenever you want. You do tend to miss the other lions though, and the penguins and the giraffes and the parrots. You do miss that connection with other people because it's quite lonely. And I realized very quickly that I needed to have regular connections with people, all kinds, friends, business contacts, corporate partners, just wonderful network contacts. every week to make sure I had that human connection. Now, networking made this business work. Now, there's a network through the university, there's a network through the RSA, which really worked for me, the Royal Society of Arts. And every time I spent my time networking, talking about the mission, learning about other people's missions, this shared hearts and minds, real magic and inspiration happened. And this is where you get doors opening and collaborations form. And I quickly realized that your network and the collaborations that you can create from that network, Aspect being another perfect example, is those are the vehicles that take you into successful delivery and successful traction. And of course, every effort you make speaking to people does come back to you. Now, what do I notice now, looking back over those years? You know, there's lots of hindsight that I noticed. Right at the beginning, I had this super well-educated, naive optimism. I was excited by everything. Everyone who said yes to me, I was so excited about it. Thought, yes, we're going to do that. Yes, we're going to do that. However, not all yeses are yeses. They're actually long-term no's. So when I realise now is that a lot of the yeses were actually no's, and I'm very careful about deciding what's going to turn into a real yes and what's going to be a fake yes. Thinking about the commitment of time. And the other question, of course, that I notice is that the revenue model changes all the time. When you think about that financial model that keeps you sustainable and that you learn in training, you are constantly adapting and you're constantly needing support with that. You know, I stopped doing certain things to generate money. I started doing new things to generate, and I'm constantly evolving the way that I ask the people who pay the money to actually interact with us. So it's not a straight line. I also noticed that you can't know everything, you know, and it's actually quite liberating when you decide that it's okay not to know everything and not to be skilled in everything, because you can surround yourself by people who really can help you and really can fill those gaps for you. Now, another interesting piece of hindsight is that any social entrepreneur and any entrepreneur at all is driven by, yes, what they know, but they're also driven by who they are as a person. And this is a big part of your training through the Enterprise Centre is, you know, what are your values? What are your beliefs? What are your skills? How are they going to take you forward? How are they going to hold you back? And I quickly noticed that some of the beliefs I held about myself were not helping. I had lots of strengths and lots of positive beliefs in other areas. But one, for example, was I can be a people pleaser, which means I want everyone to be happy and benefit. And that's wonderful for my relationships. But it also means that sometimes I give myself away for free and I help too much. So being aware of those things is so important. And the last one, as I finish now, is resilience. You know, no amount of training and no amount of connections can actually formulate resilience in you as a person. And you're going to have lots of ups and downs. They're absolutely unavoidable. You know, lots of yeses aren't yeses. And you've got to cope with that. And I don't know an entrepreneur who doesn't sometimes think, oh, I'm going to get a job, because that just feels like the easier thing. However, it's not really what we want to do, you know. And COVID-19, an excellent example of really understanding resilience. You know, there's nothing tougher than the market today. And I've realized that there's a resilience here about not giving up, taking a break, resting, rethinking, rebooting the model and thinking, what can we achieve next year? I wiped out 18 months of planning and revenue just because of the pandemic, but you've got to be resilient and move forward with that. And lastly, it's about believing in what you're doing and that it matters. And this is the social science element, is absolute resilience and belief and focus in what you're doing and where the purpose is absolutely rock solid. So thank you, and back to you, Tony.
All right, thank you very much, Alison. That was great. I really like your lion analogy and your fake yeses. I think that will join the fake news analogies. So thank you very much. That was really inspirational. And I hope that obviously everybody out there will take their own messages from that, and that'll enable people to move forwards. So I'm now going to talk about our journey here. So Just a caveat, you'll have heard Masood Enterprise Centre, and we are now Masood Entrepreneurship Centre. This is a very recent name change, so if people switch tracks, that's the reason why. So we are now the Masood Entrepreneurship Centre. As Laura and Alison said, we have a long and experienced history in helping colleagues in social sciences. However, that was obviously at an institutional level. So when Aspect came along with their 3-year programme, our aim was to then take this and help work with other universities to develop, implement and scale up a leading process that would eventually be able to project things on a global stage. So what we basically did was, there are 8 communities of practice that wrap around this whole social sciences commercialization area, from communications to academic input to research. And the strand we were looking at was around taking these and developing a community of practice that could help drive the commercialization of social science entrepreneurship. So we did that in 2 ways. The first was we created a number of curated assets. Each institution started to put together its own case studies, which are all available on the Aspect website. These are many and varied, and I think it shows the beauty and the breadth and the depth of what social sciences can do. We've got everything there from sorting out issues of poverty, health, right down to things around developing policy, and then areas which are also connected in with the STEM and healthcare agendas. So when we came together as a collective under Aspect, there were 7 other universities, ourselves, LSE, Oxford, etc. That's now at 11 and growing, and we would like to obviously see a lot more partners joining there. So basically, when we came together as a number of institutions, we all obviously had different approaches. We had different scale, we had different resources available. So everybody had a leveling experience that we needed to bring together and share our learning, share our insights, rather than seek to have the larger players dominate, because it's extremely important that when you're actually developing a program, it has to be for everyone. And you've seen our strapline at MEC is entrepreneurship for all, and I think social sciences, it's particularly important for that, because when a nascent area is growing, it's not easy to identify which of those ideas are going to be the ones that you want to develop. So you have to develop quite a wide, spread your net quite widely. So the first thing we had to do was align ourselves, and we had, as I say, a number of social sciences projects that were either in development or already progressing. These were, some of them were at the very local level, some were at the national level, and some of the ideas from LSE were at the global level. So we had to bring these all together, and we really wanted to focus down on the experience of that. So we took a while. It took us a while to throw a 6 to start, but we did. And that was really focusing around what were the critical things we wanted to do? What did we actually want to develop as a tool set? So we came up with a framework, that a shared tool set that would be available for everybody, that anybody could pick up and use as an institution, would be one of our key outcomes, as well as curating all the assets around our case studies, our learning, and then a progressive communications plan with that around the whole programme. The other thing we wanted to do was to really develop the infrastructure. As Laura said, the infrastructure we developed locally was very robust, and we wanted to do the same. So we really focused on the infrastructure, and it's a stark contrast that social sciences doesn't have the same constructs as, say, STEM or healthcare. Now, that's obviously for various reasons. Sometimes it's easier when you're dealing with a discrete output, or you're dealing with a sort of minimum viable proposition, or a sort of outcome that is known. Whereas in social sciences, the area is so broad and deep, it's often more about surfacing the idea and then really focusing down on where that is best applied. And that goes back to Alison's learning. It's really about focus and where this is best applied, because when you don't have a large capacity and a large resource, you really need to be effective in the way you're doing this. So what we wanted to do is develop that again as an outcome. So what were the benefits? The benefits have been how everybody was able to share best practice and how everybody's committed additional time to deliver these outputs. The other thing is how, as we developed more as a group and met more, we realised that our skill sets were similarly aligned. As Alison said as well, our values were similarly aligned. People working in this area were keen to see the benefits of social sciences out there in society, out there in industry, for the benefit of everybody. So once we developed the construct physically, once we developed the commitment internally between ourselves, we then said, okay, what could be one of the first things we could do? So we said, well, what we'd really like to do is develop a first cohort of people who could go through a structured program that would live beyond the aspect funding, which is over 3 years. So we looked around, and one of the areas we identified a great scheme from was in the STEM area. There's a scheme which runs through Innovate UK called iCure, Innovation and Commercialisation of University Research. And there's a precursor to that called the Lean Launchpad, which again, as Laura explained, is built on the Lean Startup philosophy of failing forward fast and doing it as a minimum viable and validating all the time with your customers and iterating as you go. So basically we put together a program that's called Success. Success is based around a boot camp where we took 14 entrepreneurs through the first cohort. They were wide and varied. As I say, some were very much at the local, about improvements to childcare provision for helping local authorities spend their budgets better, through to global outlooks, and one of the centres in LSE which looks at changes within the local areas within the United States. So these were really, really wide and diverse. But the thing was, when the programme came together, it was around the February-March period. We had planned the usual, meet in a venue with lots of sidebar activity. And then, as Alison said, along came COVID and we had to change everything pretty much in a couple of weeks. So we moved everything online, and this was a develop as you go program then, because we were all on Zoom. Everyone was managing everything else at the same time. But again, I think the benefit of that was it brought everybody together. It brought camaraderie, it brought focus, it brought a shared sense of mission. The idea of continuing during that period became very strong. So out of adversity, again, came a benefit. And I think for me personally, it's great to work with other peers, and it's great to develop ideas from your peers. But when you actually go and work directly with the practitioners who are going to do this, the Alisons, the Ricardos, this was where the real value came, because you can see this like we are now on a live stream. You can see the people in there, you can see them doing it, you're there with them. And that's the really important thing, is this is a contact sport, or a socially distanced contact sport at the moment, but you have to be out there doing it, and you have to build that rapport with your academic entrepreneurs. So we've really benefited from that. So any program, I would say, that people get involved in or conduct locally, it should really be about having something that's enduring, having something that's repeatable and scalable depending on what resources you have. And equally important is to begin that process as quickly as possible with your target audience, which is, in our case, students, graduates and staff. So as regards the future and sustainability, we're working now on another iteration of success that will be starting in October. We're creating a number of other opportunities to make this an enduring asset. And I think one of the other takeaways is that even though the origination of this was towards a £50,000 prize, it's surprising how quickly that became a sort of non-essential element. Of course, it's an essential element for development, but that focus has become secondary to the relationships that have been built by the academics, the postdocs on the support teams. They've had an array of people who volunteer their time, from experienced social entrepreneurs like Alison to people who provide professional support, training, pitching, etc. So we hope that the future is bright for Aspect. We hope that Aspect will help in a number of ways to get us out of our current situation. And we also hope that many of you amongst the audience will join in that mission and raise the bar and the prevalence of social sciences in entrepreneurship and commercialization. So just to demonstrate that now, I'd like to hand over to Ricardo to talk to you about Keep It Human.
Thank you, Tony. Just to double check that you can see my screen properly.
Yep, can do.
Okay, so I'm going to discuss briefly the journey from being a music academic researcher at the University of Manchester to become a social entrepreneur, and in the form of a spin out of a company that primes social values. I'm going to cover very briefly my background research, the Aspect journey, and briefly also discuss what is the company about in a couple of slides. So my research combines the idea of the real and the virtual in creative composition, in musical performance, if you wish. And you think about it, composition on stage hasn't changed much for the last couple of 100 years. So what I'm looking at is this idea of combining the imaginative world of the digital and the physical one, and raise new questions that we never thought about before. And the way for me to answer these questions is creating music, which is a great way of doing it. And I'm going to give you, put you a very short excerpt of one of the pieces so you will better understand what it entails. This is a concert in Japan earlier this year. So the idea here is that you have the physical people and the representation of the instruments in the virtual world, and somehow they are both connected. So they interact with each other. You can transform the concept of the score and create something which is absolutely dynamic. Or think about completely different instruments that don't exist in the real world. So the physical controls the virtual. And also another important aspect of the research is the idea of the human, the anthropomorphism of acoustic instruments. So we build instruments that resemble humans. And this creates a lot of anxiety to the audience, the player. So I always think of the work of Dali and the surrealism when I build these strange sculptures and sound. So the place I work with, I serve as director of the Novas Research Center, which is based in music at the Martin Harris Center. And the idea of entrepreneurship is not just unique for the experience I just had with the Aspect program. We actually have a few spin-outs. One is in the form of the usual musical ensemble, the Distractful, that pioneers in bringing computer music and acoustic instruments to the world. Through the world, they started by Maurizio Paoli and Sam Salem, were PhDs at Novars, and now they are all worldwide working and performing. And the second aspect is two companies that emerged from the concept of locative audio, which is part of my ICS, the impact case study for music. So one company is called Sonic Maps, and you can check them out, and the other one is Echoes. They look at narrative and stories using a map as the guiding source and as a mechanism to unfold the story. With respect to the Aspect journey, which started in March this year, a bunch of academics, like including myself, were sent to a mission to build something that they haven't done before. So we started with a lot of great support. I have great respect and admiration for the support and the knowledge that all these colleagues have, from the TTOs, Tony Walker, to the people running the Aspect program. But also the Masood enterprise gave me the possibility to have an internship with a fantastic researcher, helping me with all the sort of background work and collecting data and so on. The training has been fantastic, also very wide, learning skills that I never imagined, from health and education, policy in the UK, social techs, networking, charity, IP in the social sciences, that, believe it or not, is quite interesting to learn. Also pitch training, which for me has been the hardest. They also provided us with funding for market validation. So we have to do a lot of interviews. I was able to hire a consultancy firm that's brilliant in providing us with key players that can validate that your ideas are good or not so good. Most of the times are not that good, so you start pivoting. And then that was almost part of my own input to it. We created an MVP, like a sort of minimal viable proposition or product, leading towards the pitch for money, the final pitch in November. So in terms of the challenges I've been facing, first of all, to say that, if someone tells you that this is easy, it is not. It's really hard. But I think the reward is so high that, one thing balances the other one. So if you're really not sure about whether or not to take this pathway, I would say just go for it. Don't think about it twice. But let's get into detail to tell you a little bit more about, what was, from my point of view, what has been the most important challenges. The first of all, is that somehow it clashed with my academic research culture, in the sense that, we have to start constantly pivoting around traction, validation, customer needs. Pivoting is very, very familiar to me in my research. This is what we do when we compose these pieces. We try and error, you play with the performance, you try the sensors technology and so on. But pivoting around the customer needs is absolutely new, because, we create artistic products. we don't serve an audience in that sense. We are aware of the needs of the audiences, but we also want to inspire them. We want to create something that they haven't seen before. We want to put them in immersive situations where, where they can actually transcend the understanding of the self. And the second part was the market validation versus product design. I've always been more the guy who runs the product first and doesn't read the manual, if you want. However, I learned an interesting lesson here that you have to validate that the idea is profitable. You cannot just build something that people don't want. And this is very hard for me to understand. It's very hard for me to explain to the students, because creative people are just like that. Like you think about something great and then you just go for it. You can't do that when you want to create a social entrepreneurship. You have to be sure that there will be a market behind. Otherwise, people will not like to invest in your idea because it will have a very short runway. And I have to say that these spin-outs started 10 years ago. The 3 ones I mentioned in Novars, they're still around in 10 years' time. So meaning that they've been doing very well. And they also thought about this idea of, let's not play for ourselves, let's play for the audience, if you wish. Business skills. I mean, personally, I'm a musician, been working in academia for many years and as a composer for almost like all my life. I actually have a training in economics. I did 5 years degree at the Valencia University in business. But I felt that was nothing to do with the sort of things I learned. From the jargon, from the idea of the pitch, I had to really completely reinvent myself in that aspect. And then the social aspect of the enterprise, it was, for me, also very difficult to find. And I think we got it, but somehow for us, for musicians, it's like, okay, it is important, but we don't see that on a daily basis. It's rock and depression. We sort of concentrate on the research inquiry. We just have a great artistic output, but we don't think about the huge potential that music has to change people's lives. And I will repeat, the huge potential, because music is a universal language, and we sometimes forget about that. So I only have 5 minutes left, so let's jump into the company. So the company is called Keep It Human. And here you have some sort of contact details for the purpose of the video recording. Keep It Human is a game ecosystem for digital altruism. What does it mean? Well, we add music and, if you want, fun to the philanthropic experience to connect gamers, young people, with the ownership of social challenges. So I'm going to put you a video it's a 1 minute video so that you can better see and hear what I'm trying to describe here. So this is our first use case. So going back to the presentation, in gaming, the concept, if you want, the trend recently was this idea of free to pay. Nobody pays for games anymore. However, within the games, we have this system of micro payments. So you like an asset, you just buy it. You know, a sword, something that you want to purchase because of you look nicer in the game. But this was nicely applied to the idea of fundraising. For example, there's a company that I love very much, that game company, it's a game company, who launched a game last year called Sky, Children of Light. And it's actually a spin-off of a university in Southern California from 2005, 2006, I believe. They raised $1 million just purchasing a lotus plant from players. So a lot of young people donated like $1 just to buy this lotus plant. That then 100% of the money went to this NGO, Doctors Without Borders. And at Epic Times, it made a lot of sense. It was not only about raising reputation, it was also about, you know, experimenting with the concept of fundraising in the context of gaming. Our company investigates this because, you know, let's face it, game companies, they don't do that for a living. They do games, right? But the idea of Keep It Human was to take that to the next level and find this as a competitive advantages within the game environment to provide a sense of management to the full cycle of a philanthropic experience, meaning that we will provide a new pool of donors, which are in the young people. They're really willing to help. They don't have they're the donors of the future, if you want. Through this gamified experience, you play for fun, you play because you're interested in culture, but you end up creating an awareness of how important it is to think about the welfare and think about the other, even people that you don't even know, you haven't met yet. So the second aspect was to provide efficiency and simplicity in the feedback. Feedback is complicated, you know, it's very difficult for beneficiaries that have a small structure. So we provide a way to do that through these sort of digital twins, as we call them. And then the prediction of the future in terms of sustainability of infrastructure, meaning that sometimes you see, for example, in our case, people fundraising for a skate park. Okay, that's my, it says that, that was the alarm. So people fundraising for a skate park but not providing the means to run the park. In a year's time, the beneficiaries are in big trouble. So this, for example, is a campaign that we are building, and I'll show you very briefly how it works. Just to demonstrate that this is possible. It's possible to create an ongoing long-term relationship between beneficiary and donor to provide this infrastructure that otherwise will never arrive. So you play the game, you raise green energy, in this case it's called Rhythmic Energy, and then you can convert that into a wonderful digital skate that you donate in the virtual, and then we, through a proxy, or through our, in this case, GoFundMe campaign, providing the physical world. We send one real skate to Maputo. In fact, not only one skate, but also a little bit of more in terms of education, package, and so on. And then we provide this sort of second app that connects donors with the beneficiaries, and we call it digital twin. So it provides efficiency, provides a new generation of donors, and also provides a novel, creative, if you want, way to interact in the philanthropic space. Thank you very much. That's my presentation for today. So I go back to Tony, I presume. Stop the share.
Okay. Thanks very much, Ricardo. I mean, it's this fascinating example of the breadth and depth I talked about before. Rhythmic Energy, Lions, Fake Yeses. I think we've had a really, really good immersion today in the potential of social sciences. So I'd just like to open up any questions for our panel. One of the first ones is, if you'd like to address this, perhaps Laura, you would like to start. What was the difference you saw in social sciences academics compared to, say, STEM or healthcare academics?
It's a good question, actually. I think one of the key things with a number of entrepreneurs from whichever discipline actually is that, as I mentioned, that they don't often see themselves as an entrepreneur. So there's a lot of reshaping and learning and gaining an understanding of what the whole process entails. And so that was something that we would see as a similarity across all. But I think it would be perhaps that they were much more eager to be engaging with the beneficiaries. You know, so getting that service or delivery mechanism out there, rather than perhaps taking a lot of time over creating the perfect MVP. So it was much more potentially even holding them back a little bit from getting out there and deliver.
Hey, thank you. And Alison, perhaps how would you have seen yourself at the time compared to, say, I mean, obviously when you were on the program, you would have been involved with some of the science and STEM academics. So perhaps could you give us a view as to what you saw as the potential difference or similarity indeed?
It's a really interesting question, and when you talk about science and academia, it's steeped in stats and facts and research and concepts and theories. And I think that that's the case for any academic, but perhaps the scientists in the STEM subjects find it slightly more difficult to step outside of that and see the bigger picture and understand themselves as individuals, what it takes to be the driver of the new idea that they have. It's difficult to say, to be honest, because it's such an individual experience. Every person has their own beliefs, their own values, their own set of strengths, their unique value proposition, and it's really down to the individual. And I think it's hard to say that there are any generalizations, really.
Okay, thank you. So here's one perhaps for Ricardo, because you are really focused on addressing solutions to challenges that have come about through COVID, like loss of donations for charities. Do you think the impact of COVID has created more opportunities for social entrepreneurs or fewer?
I think if you work in the digital or your proposition navigates this idea of using technology to expand your practice, definitely yes. And in our case, it's very clear, like 4 billion have been lost in terms of donations in the entrepreneurship, in the philanthropic market in the UK only, in the first 4 weeks of COVID.
Yeah. Okay.
Because most of the donations are made in the streets, knocking on doors.
Yeah.
So the idea of having an entrepreneurship that navigates the concept of the digital, this new reality, definitely provides scope for, I would say, finding new ways to reinvent, even if you come from the analog perspective.
Yeah.
Reinventing business.
So I'm afraid that we've run out of time now. I'd like to thank everybody for joining today's session. I hope you found it enjoyable and insightful. We hope you can join us on the other aspects events that are running over these 2 months. And we'd really value your feedback on this session. Once the session has ended, you'll be directed to a short survey. It'll take 1 minute to complete. So if you could, that would be great. And the recording of the session will go live in the next few days, and we'll let you know once it's available to view. So many thanks for tuning in. Many thanks to the panel. Many thanks to all those insights you've given. And we hope that this inspires and motivates some of you to take that next step. Thank you very much.